Get ready to dive deep, folks. Because today, we're taking a look at the U.S. Navy Reserve's Battle Orders 2032. It's easy to think, well, the military, that's got to be a slow-moving ship to turn around, right?
Right.
But this document shows a branch of the armed forces really hitting warp speed on transforming themselves for the future.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating how they lay it all out. I mean, for decades, the U.S. Navy has, ruled the waves, but things are changing and fast. We all know that.
Right. New challenges.
China's out there building up their Navy like crazy, and then you've got Russia throwing their weight around too. Battle Orders 2032. It's basically their plan to stay ahead of the game in a world that looks a lot different than it did a few years ago.
And it really jumps out right from the beginning how much the strategic situation has changed. They flat out say it's not about that post-9/11 world anymore where everything was about threats on land. Now it's all about strategic competition, and specifically in the maritime domain.
Uh-huh.
But then they throw in this phrase that I really wanted to unpack with you, multi-domain warfare. What exactly does that even mean?
Well, it means get ready for things to get complicated. It's not your grandfather's Navy anymore. It's not even the Navy of, 10 years ago. Think about it this way. What if, say, there's a cyber attack, launched from anywhere in the world, doesn't even matter these days, and it cripples the satellites the Navy uses for navigation. All of a sudden, you've got ships stranded out there. That's what they mean by multi-domain warfare. It's fighting on, under, and above the sea, sure, but also in cyberspace. Even space itself is becoming a battleground. They've got to be ready for everything.
So it's like the Navy's playing three-dimensional chess while everyone else is stuck on checkers.
That's a great way to put it.
So where does the reserve fit into all of this? The document uses this phrase, strategic depth. What does that actually look like on the ground?
So think of the reserve as the Navy's secret weapon, this deep well of talent they can call on whenever they need it. The document lays out three main ways they'll use the reserve to provide that strategic depth. One is they'll be sending people with really specific skills to existing Navy units. It's basically adding a surge capacity of experts.
I see.
Almost like having a cybersecurity SWAT team ready to go at a moment's notice if there's a digital attack.
So having the right people in the right place at the right time.
Exactly.
Makes sense. What about those standalone units they mentioned? They talk about those too.
Yeah, that's the second big piece of the puzzle. They want to be able to deploy entire units that can operate independently and do a lot of the same things that regular Navy units do. It's all about flexibility, having multiple options to respond to a crisis. That way, even if one approach gets taken out, they can adapt.
So it's about options, being able to change tactics quickly in a multi-domain world where things can shift so fast.
You got it.
Gotcha.
And then the third thing, and this is really where the reserve structure is so valuable, is how they're going to use all the civilian skills their people have. You've got reservists who, in their day jobs, are doing cutting-edge stuff in, aerospace engineering, software development, logistics, you name it.
Yeah.
That's a goldmine of expertise they can tap into to solve the Navy's toughest problems.
It's like they're putting together a real-life Justice League, but instead of fighting bad guys, it's all about brain power and having the right skills for the mission.
And the best part is, they don't just talk about the strategy in broad strokes. They actually get into the weeds of how this is all going to affect the lives of everyday reservists.
Yeah, it's a pretty futuristic vision, like when they say, all reserve administration's in the cloud. I mean, wow.
That's a huge deal. Think about it. No more piles of paperwork. No more trying to decipher confusing forms. No more spending hours on hold just to figure out why your paycheck is wrong. They're talking about a totally streamlined digital experience for everything.
So hypothetically, a reservist could say, go to their regular doctor for their annual physical, and all that information automatically gets updated in the Navy system.
Exactly. The idea is to acknowledge that reservists have lives outside of the Navy. They've got families, jobs, commitments. This system is all about flexibility, letting them manage their training, deployments, even travel arrangements all in one place whenever it's convenient for them.
And it's not just about convenience either. The document also talks about these new training models that are a lot different from the old 1 weekend a month drill schedule.
Yeah.
What's the thinking behind that?
Well, it's all about making the training as effective and relevant as possible. Let's say you've got a reservist who specializes in, for example, underwater drone operations. Instead of just doing some generic training 1 weekend a month, they could spend a whole week embedded with an active duty unit, getting hands-on experience with the latest tech.
It's like an apprenticeship, but for, 21st century naval warfare.
Exactly.
And speaking of specialization, there's a big emphasis in this document on career development within the reserves. It's not just about filling slots anymore. It's about developing real expertise.
Absolutely. They want people to be able to build careers in the reserves, to become true experts in their fields. They specifically mention things like cyber warfare, artificial intelligence, even space-based systems as areas where they want to see reservists developing deep knowledge.
So you're not just a jack of all trades anymore. You could become a master of one, even as a reservist. That's a big shift. But it all ties back into that bigger goal of being ready for whatever the 21st century throws at them. All this stuff, the technology, the new training, the focus on careers, it's all about creating a force that's more agile, more responsive, more lethal.
Yeah, they want to be ready for anything.
It's like they looked at what makes Silicon Valley tick and said, how do we bottle that up and make it work for the Navy?
Yeah.
But we've all seen those strategic plans, right? Big ideas, looks great on paper, but then...
The execution is everything.
Exactly. But Battle Orders 2032 actually gets into the nitty-gritty of how they're going to make this transformation happen.
Yeah, it's surprisingly detailed.
They lay out 4 main areas they're going to focus on: designing the force, training the force, mobilizing the force, and developing the force. So, it's easy to say we're going to build a more tech-savvy reserve, but how do you actually get there from here?
Right. So take that idea we were talking about before, tailored training. They're taking that even further with what they call tailored readiness requirements. What that basically means is each reservist's training plan is going to be customized based on their specific role, where they're located, even the kinds of deployments they might be called on to support.
So a cybersecurity expert in, say, California might have a completely different readiness checklist than someone who does logistics and is stationed in Virginia, for example.
Exactly. It's all about efficiency. Making sure that everyone is 100% focused on the exact skills they would need to be effective if they get called up. They even talk about streamlining things like pay and personnel processes so there's no lag time when someone transitions from the reserves to active duty.
Makes sense. The last thing you need in the middle of a crisis is to be dealing with bureaucratic headaches.
Exactly. And that kind of ties into their emphasis on continuous learning and innovation. They actually use this phrase, relentless self-improvement, which I thought was interesting. And those centers of excellence, the COEs we talked about, they see those as a key part of building that culture.
So the COEs aren't just places where you go for a week of training and that's it. It's more like they're hubs of innovation.
Yeah, like think tanks, but focused on really practical warfighting skills. Bringing the best people in the reserve together to share what they've learned, develop new tactics, and just generally make sure that everyone's on the same page.
It's like the Navy's own internal skunk works, constantly trying to push the envelope.
Exact.
But it's not just about the tech and the training, right? There's also a big focus in this document on taking care of reservists and their families.
Right, and that's huge. They get that if you want to attract and retain the best people, you've got to support their families too.
Yeah.
It's not just about salary and benefits, although obviously that's important. It's about creating a culture where reservists feel valued and respected, both when they're in uniform and when they're not.
Because at the end of the day, a strong force starts with strong people.
Absolutely.
But one thing that really comes through in this document is the sense of urgency. This isn't just some theoretical exercise in planning for the future. It's about taking action now.
Totally. There's a line in the conclusion that I thought was really powerful. It says, "Time is a factor in our transformation, and the clock is ticking." They're basically saying, look, the world is changing fast, we've got to move, and we've got to move now.
Which brings us right back to where we started, with that image of a branch of the military doing a complete 180 and transforming itself at warp speed.
It's impressive, yeah.
This document isn't just a plan, it's a call to action, not just for the Navy Reserve, but for all of us, really. It makes you think about how we can all be more forward-thinking and adaptable in our own lives, right? No matter what we do.
Absolutely. We can all learn something from the way they're approaching this.
So, as we come up for air from this deep dive into the Navy Reserve's vision for the future, it leaves us with a lot to chew on. How can we apply that same kind of forward-thinking, adaptable mindset to our own lives and careers? Something to think about. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
My pleasure.